Is there going to be a greater push for internships and things like that? And then moving on to AI in education. So, obviously, everyone has very different opinions about AI. You could be on the side where you're like, I don't want anything to do with it. And you could be on the side of, this is awesome, this is amazing, this is the best thing ever. And I will say, when I was in college and ChatGPT came out, I was on the side, I'll never use it. That is horrible and all those things. And I just kind of want to explain kind of my opinion and my evolving opinion of AI. So I started my engineering degree and I was in a ton of different weed out classes that were really hard and challenging, like general chemistry, OChem, high level coding classes and the general coding classes, calculus all the way up to linear algebra, um, different things like that, physics with calculus and then going up to the more high level, where these classes were really hard and really um, they would take up a ton of your time. And so I would get through all those classes, and then in fall and spring of 2022, that's when ChatGPT got really popular, and that was when it was kind of like introduced. Um, and I was super skeptical. I was kind of honestly upset about it because I just struggled through all of these classes the previous year. And then all the students now taking those classes can do it in a quarter of the time, can get the all the answers to the homework right away without struggling and all those things. So like for example, in one of my coding classes, if you hit an error or a bug or something within your code, and you couldn't figure out what it was, you would go to office hours. And so office hours was all the way across campus, and you'd put your name on this huge list, and there would be, no joke, probably over 100 kids waiting for help by one um, like TA to get help with their code to because they had an error. And so in the hallway of this building, there would just be so many students waiting, and you did not want to miss your chance. So you were there for hours just waiting for help on this one piece of code for this one error. And how many errors do you come across when you're coding a whole application? Normally more than one. So um, that's kind of what I thought about what college was like before AI and ChatGPT. And then I had some friends that took it later on, and they could just take their whole assignment description, plug it into ChatGPT, take the output, and just submit it. And it would take them less than 5 minutes to do all that. So compared to me, who spent probably like 10 to 20 hours on every assignment, they could do it in 5 minutes. And it made me very upset. So I did not like ChatGPT. And I thought of it more of a cheating tool, and it was not good. But moving into the fall of 2023, and unfortunately, I am a student, so I think of school in semesters, so that's why the timeline's kind of funny. But in fall 2023, on my last day of class, one of my professors showed us how to use ChatGPT for idea generation. This was like a safety engineering class, so we studied a lot of plane crash accidents and workplace and hospital accidents, and we'd have to come up with these huge reports of like why the error happened and what do you do about the error with and from a more management perspective at the very origin and the root cause. So he showed us how we could actually use ChatGPT to generate ideas, and it was extremely useful. And I was still like, oh, I can't believe my professor's telling us that we should be using AI. Like I thought of it as a cheating tool. So that kind of opened up my mind a little bit, but I was still hesitant. And then moving into the next semester, I was taking a machine learning coding class, and this was pretty high level, so everyone already had foundation of like coding um in R. And my professor, who just left Oracle at the time, was telling us that we needed to take advantage of ChatGPT for helping to debug our code or create code skeletons. And he even showed us how you could link up ChatGPT into the R. And I still didn't really use it. I would still email him with questions and things like that. But I was interested because this is now my second professor that I highly respected that showed me, hey, this is a tool that you can use. And then the following semester, in between that time frame, I had an internship at Granger, and I had a fellow intern that told me that they were gonna they've never coded before and that they were gonna code something in SQL. And I was like, yeah, right. Like it's gonna take you at least a couple hours to learn or something like that. And they did it again in just an hour. They coded something in SQL using ChatGPT. And I looked over it and it wasn't exactly like how I would write it or someone that probably learned. It wasn't as concise, but it worked. And I was like, wow, if I don't start using this, I'm going to fall behind, even though I do have those skills. So then in the following fall semester, I started seeing its value and supporting my learning and problem solving with it. So, for example, I was in a technical writing course, and my writing professor told me she would just keep on telling me use ChatGPT to help make your writing more concise because I have a problem where I just write and write and write. And I did not want to do that. I felt so wrong turning in something that ChatGPT even touched. And she kept on pushing me. So I finally tried it. And when submitting something of my own tone and my own work and then asking it just to make it more concise, I didn't lose my tone. I didn't lose my writing. It just sounded that little bit much or that small bit better. And I was like, wow, this is really impactful. So now that is always something that I use as a tool with my own writing as I look, is there any way that I could make this sound better and things like that without losing my tone? Um, Also, I was in a high level graduate physics course at the time, and I would use it. I would copy my whole textbook or like an expert from my textbook and plug it into ChatGPT and say, can you help me make my notes on this? And then I'd write down my notes following the screen, and it would make it a little bit less scary to read this huge textbook. I would also ask it for concepts that I didn't understand as much. I'd say, can you explain this to like a sixth grader? And then I would slowly work up to my level, so like a college student or higher, what their understanding should be. And then also I used it to make practice exams because my professor didn't give any practice problems whatsoever. It was very, very hard, but because I had ChatGPT, I was able to practice on some problems. And then that was when I graduated from my undergrad, and I decided that I wanted to do a master's, and I thought this was the best time to learn about AI. So all these classes were introduced. And with grad school, coming from a technical degree, I was not used to all these readings. So I was reading 30 to 50 page, multiple of these research papers for every single class. And it was very overwhelming as someone that didn't ever do readings, besides like textbook readings in my undergrad. And it was very scary, but I was able to use ChatGPT to make an outline, give me a summary where it was less scary to start my readings, and then something called Notebook LM, which I'll talk about further. And then sometimes when you're listening to professor and you just can't write fast enough or you can't type fast enough what your notes are, where some of it might not be complete and messy, I'd take my notes, put it into ChatGPT and say, fill in the rest. And it would give me a bunch of examples under each of my like notes, and it would make it all pretty, but my notes weren't lost. But that was something where I was talking about human oversight. I would have to read it through and make sure nothing was hallucinated. And then also automating tasks. And then now moving into the now, I would say that I think of it as an essential tool, but I also am keeping a little bit of skepticism in the back of my mind to because there are some concerns about data, people kind of becoming lazy and on autopilot where you just copy and paste and blindly take the output as ground truth. Let's go through some questions. So, Mark, do you want to start?
Yeah, on the ChatGPT to generate code, um, I'd be really surprised if the professors would accept something from student that was totally ChatGPT. But I know there are tools for text that they can use to detect if something's ChatGPT generated to reject it. I'm not sure about the code, but one of the issues with code is you have to be really, really precise what you ask for. And you have to check the code, make sure it works. You can't just use it. And B, it probably doesn't have important things like error checking and stuff in it. So if you give it a bad input, it might just blow up. And in a if, for a professional environment, we can't use AI for any of our code development. That's not true. We have an AI assisted
Hmm.
coding tool, but basically what it does is when they're coding, it'll give them suggested snippets of code for specific small functions, but not like an entire program. And
Hmm.
then, but we still have to be, we have the engineers have to sign an agreement before they use the tool that they will verify all the output of the AI is correct, as just as if they'd written it themselves. So it may save you some
Right.
time, but it still requires a lot of back end verification if you're going to you know, try and use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good at like debugging code, but like I said, I wouldn't blindly trust it, and that's kind of what I'm scared of, is that some of the people that might be entering the career world now wouldn't understand the implications of just copying and pasting a code from ChatGPT with having little experience of oversight and um, how the code really should be run or any intuition of what it should be. So, like AI assisted code can be helpful, but you can't just do complete AI code. So, I feel like that is a very ethical
Like
application
the
of it.
example you mentioned, a guy generated a SQL script and he didn't know a thing about SQL, so he had no
Yeah.
way of checking to see if what was came out was right or wrong. He just assumed it was right, which is scary.
Yeah, it is scary. I think it's a little bit less scary in like a sequel, but if we were talking about like JavaScript or something where you could actually impact some of the background of the code and it's not just at the forefront, it's very scary. So yeah. I'm glad that I still had I'm jealous that they have this tool like all the new students with these weed out classes. But I'm glad that I do have the foundation that I do because I think when I was talking about that experience part of using AI and how a lot of postgrads don't have that, I feel like because I was at such a pivotal time where I still have the foundation and everything, um, I can easily notice if something's off and notice what are the ethical applications of it and things like that. Okay.
Let's go to Gabe, then Chandra, then Raju, then Alan.
Hi, thanks. This is great. I especially like your progression from the skepticism moving off to the right. I think
Yeah.
that's great. I was going to make the same point about it being very alarming that somebody who didn't know a language was using GPT to generate something and then turning that in. But I'll go a step farther. Also related to debugging is enhancing and modifying. And so if you take code that's been generated by GPT and you don't really understand it and you need to make a change to it and you feed it back into GPT and describe the change, there's a term called spaghetti code, which is
Yeah.
code that has been maintained out of all comprehensibility. And so the idea that you're shoveling code into one side of GPT and telling it what to do and it comes out on the other side, and no human being has any understanding of what's really going on. That's a very alarming way to do software development.
Hmm.
The other part of it is software documentation. So maybe you tell GPT to generate a program, and then you tell GPT to generate documentation on that program, how that program might be used by someone else who didn't develop the software. And so it just seems to me that there's a risk of corkscrewing into
Mhm.
incomprehensibility and unusability in the software development process. I'd go back to what the previous commenter said, that quote, programmers who don't know how to program using GPT to develop programs is an alarming prospect. And while I'm talking, I'll go back to something you were talking about earlier, which is the hallucinations.
Mhm.
And since a lot of what ChatGPT and other LLMs are creating is now being put out on the internet, a lot of that is being used to train large language models.
Yeah.
And so again, you've got hallucinations compounding on themselves, and there's just a general, when that happens, there's just a general decrease in quality of what's moving around the loop. And that also is a little bit alarming. If there's no humans in that loop to make sure that hallucinations are not being fed back into the other side of the large language model, you're on the way to just producing garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so scary. Like, what are the downstream effects of that if you're training on hallucinated data in the first place? It's very, very scary. And what you were talking about earlier with the documentation not really having oversight, my mom always says that your code is only as good as what your test, how robust your test cases are. And I think that a really good programmer doesn't only create great code, um, but they also create robust test cases to really understand if it works. If you're just testing it using like ChatGPT, if you're testing it and you don't really have a background in it of the ChatGPT code, you don't really know if it actually works correctly. You don't know the
Well,
answer.
there's also the standard of you separate quality assurance and testing from development, because
Mhm.
once you've developed a program, you may have a blind spot and you see the
Yes.
program doing what you intended it to do, not necessarily what the code you wrote actually does. And you may not have thought of all of the edge conditions and the ways that bad data can be fed in. And that's why you need a separate set of eyes looking at it and say, well, what if this happens? Let's run that test that the developer did not anticipate.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of like, let's say you have a really technology advanced car, but someone that doesn't really know how to use it, how you, like, what if they can't brake the car? What if they don't know how to brake the car? It doesn't matter how good and technology advanced the car is if it, can't, if the person can't use it. And that's the same thing as people not understanding how it really works,
Well,
as
and part
like
of
how
that
to
problem is
code.
that cars now may come with a 500-page manual,
Yeah.
and not one person in 100 actually reads the manual. And I can be riding with somebody, and if I find the manual in the glove compartment, I may say, "Did you know that your car can do this?" And the answer is usually, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah. My dad
Or
always goes through it and puts sticky notes in it for me. So I know what you mean.
Or you do read the manual, you still don't understand how the function is supposed to work. That's the
Yeah.
Thanks.
problem I know.
Thanks, Gabe. Let's go to Chandra and then Raju and then Ellen. Chandra, you have to unmute.
I'm an elementary level teacher. So I'm looking at this in terms of curriculum development for public education.
Hmm.
There, we can't not do it, is my feeling about it. It's like a train and it's not stopping. So just like we have kids in the second grade with iPhones, Apple Watches that beep and they scramble to know how to turn it off. Um, we've come around a little bit full circle. We're just in Montgomery County, Maryland, public school systems taking a look at devices and what devices should be in an elementary level, middle school level, and high school level. So this is a perfect time to look at how AI can help. What do we need to do as curriculum developers to make sure that we're teaching the foundations that are going to be um, teaching students how to use this? It's a tool, but again, if we graduate students out of our system that are failing to read, then that's not going to be where we need to go. As a country, that's not where we
Yeah.
need to go.
Yeah, it is really I didn't even know that elementary school kids already had Apple Watches and stuff. That's scary that they could be using something like ChatGPT.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I don't think they do very much, but I have heard that there are
Oh.
teachers in the local high school that will not allow students to take home a writing assignment. They have to do it in the class
Oh.
so that they can watch and see whether or not they're using GPT for it. So there's a lot that's got to
Yeah.
happen behind the scenes on planning, on developing, um, and I, I'm a little bit overwhelmed because it's huge, even though it may not replace everybody's job, like you're saying,
Yeah.
find all of this that you're presenting helpful. It still is a big job to make sure that uh, teachers teachers in elementary school do use it. In fact, I used it. Um,
Really?
I I'm a music teacher in an elementary school, teaching fifth graders about blues and jazz. I chose 25 of the best and greatest. Now, I know that's a ridiculous thing, but that's a music question. Um, and I asked ChatGPT to write 2 paragraphs at a third grade level of reading ability, and include certain information like their name, their most famous song, etc. And sure enough, in like 5 minutes, I got all my 25 artists and I checked it out. I printed it off, and then I was able to give a paper with some information to each one of my students, so they can do a little bit of selections on their own, think about artists that they might like to learn about. So it was helpful, but I have the experience that, like
Yes.
you're talking about, I have the foundation skills. And that's what we have to, more than ever, I think, because for years we've been telling our young students they have to learn because they're going to college. And some of them say in their minds, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
My parents can't afford college. Some of them, of course, are ready and they're on the track. So I really appreciate all this information and how you're presenting it. But in my mind, I think there's more than one job. There's going to be
Yeah.
possibly in every classroom a an auditor that's
Oh.
going to look at what is being produced as a outcome, a product that students are going to, hand in, and whether or not it's whether or not it meets the goal, whether or not it's been written by AI, whether or not it has the tone that reflects a student's own ideologies and thoughts and feelings, whether they can include a personal example from their own lives that support
Yeah.
what they're trying to say.
That
Uh,
That's such an interesting perspective. I'm in college and I didn't even think about that effects of elementary as well and things like that. Like my cousin is a kindergarten teacher, and when she was applying to her role, one of the questions in her interview was, "How are you going to incorporate AI?"
mhm,
And this was over, I think, a year ago, and I was so stunned at the time
mhm.
that I think this fall fell right in between here. I was so stunned that that was asked. So, but then I started thinking about it and how essential of a tool it could be as a teacher to provide great resources for the students if it's used correctly.
That's the big question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Thanks very much, Chandra. Let's go to Raju and then Alan.
Hey, I had a question in the chat. Large language models, they're predictive language. It's rather easy to understand. How do you apply LLMs to non-language based questions? So the example is drug discovery or math questions or things that are not, to me, something that's language based.
So, are you asking how a large language model can do like a math problem, for example?
Sure.
Yeah, so some of the stuff that is actually it's trained on is mathematical like textbooks and things. So it is kind of predictive in the fact of if it has that context clue of what you're talking about, that it can find it with its reasoning within the data, and that's how it can predict the next token. But it is not very good at math. It still has a ways to go with
So
that.
basically, it can't solve something that hasn't been solved before.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question I had is how are the hallucination rates arrived at? Because you're having somebody watch something that's watching the watcher, right? Are you using another LLM? Uh,
So
to,
how are they caught?
yeah, how do you develop the hallucination rates? You have to run through a ton of examples
Yeah.
in order to figure that out.
So
You're not
basically,
having someone manually doing that.
yeah, it would be. I've actually done it in one of my classes. It's called the Human AI Workflow, and you basically are. It's kind of like you're observing. You're the observer, and you might be texting and asking, or querying and asking different questions, and then you would cross-verify with maybe the internet and things like that, where you can actually find the sources or things like that. Yeah. So it's someone that's individually auditing it. It's not something else is auditing for the hallucinations.
Hmm.
Thanks, Raju. Let's go to Alan and then Cheryl and then Diana and then Tim.
This is Alan. You keep referring or frequently referring to ChatGTP. There's Gemini, which I guess is a Google product. Apple is into the artificial intelligence game, and then there is the Chinese model, which when it hit the street was supposed to be a completely improved, much better thing
Yeah.
with much smaller database, much more reliance on computers. So what experience have you had with this Wunderkind Chinese one? Have you tried it? Is there have you compared the results from a query to the three of these different ones and seen if they give you the same answer? So I don't really understand how an amateur user like me is supposed to know which one of these models to use and what the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these different models.
Mm-hmm. So first, I will tell you just use ChatGPT. It's free and it's easy to use. You don't have to worry about which one you should use for certain things. That would be my recommendation. The only reason why I used all these is because I was in these classes where we were testing the differences and things like that. But I think as an individual user, I would only probably use ChatGPT. Um, DeepSeek, I do not have any background in. I was a little bit concerned about making an account because I didn't know where the data went. So I haven't used DeepSeek, but a lot of my classmates have because the stuff that you normally have to pay for, the features are for free on DeepSeek because it didn't need as much investment for the training. Um, but there are some things because it is from China. There's like a certain event that happened in China that if you ask ChatGPT about, it would tell you about it. But if you ask DeepSeek about it, it would say, I can't talk about that. So you don't know what is getting filtered when you're using something that's when you're using that one. So you might have all these features, but is any of your information filtered? So that's why I would recommend to use just ChatGPT.
Thank you.
Cheryl, then Diana, then Tim. Go ahead, Cheryl. I just unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to get to do that. Thank you. I'm Cheryl, and I'm really impressed with your presentation. It's awesome. I've never heard anything like it. It's so easy. You've been so easy to understand. Like, I think it's amazing, and I hope that I can look and watch it again. But I'm making a statement about two words that begin with an E. One is efficient, the other one is effective. I can give you an example of an efficiency. A man is an assassin, and he's told to eliminate one person. So he goes into a cafe where the person and other people are, and throws a grenade in. Done. Okay, he was efficient, he got the job done, but he wasn't effective because he killed all these other people and he used a grenade instead of a bullet. That's all I want to say. Just think
That
about it. It
is a
came up in
great
conversation.
analogy. That is a great analogy. Wow.
Thanks, and thank you.
Okay, Diana, and then Tim. Go ahead, Diana.
I'm sure that all of us have been sitting here listening to your presentation and thinking about the impact on our own lives, past and present. And I had two major kinds of thoughts about this. One had to do with my own experience as a public school teacher of middle school students. And when you mentioned the fact that teachers are now having to make kids do their writing in class, that struck a note with me because the main reason why my career encompassed starting as an English history major and teacher, and then ending up in technology and teaching keyboarding along the way. And the thing that I noted when I got interested in tech is that my learning disabled students who struggled to write did so much better when they had a computer, where they weren't worried about their horrible handwriting and they could focus on other things. And that's one of the main reasons why I got more and more interested in technology as time went on. And I still think about the fact that, you're going to make them write in class. It shouldn't be with a pen or pencil. These kids need the computer in order to do it and be effective. But the other thing I was thinking about had to do with my late husband, who was a machinist model maker, a very hands-on guy, but he hated production work. He wanted to do research. So he worked for a series of companies on various things. For example, when I met him, he was working for a company that was in the space program, and he was making parts for rockets. And he switched to a biotech company, and he was making equipment for testing with animals. And then he moved to a company that made photographic reproduction equipment, large scales, sort of like Xerox. And at the end of his career, he was working for the government, working on parts for subs, especially propellers that would be silent as the vessel went through the water. Now, unfortunately, he lived long enough to see computers used in his field, the kind of thing where they program the machine to do the part making. He didn't have to do it himself. And he never really liked that all that much. So I don't know how he would, if he were still alive, and still working, how he would view these developments with AI. And the question in my mind really is, what is AI doing or going to do with people in that kind of work? Is there still going to be a place for these people who develop parts, basically, who have to imagine and design and create parts for various things? So I wondered, since you've worked for companies, not exactly those kinds, but where do you see this going, is really, as far as jobs that, do that kind of work, really?
Um, well, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I think that, in my opinion, it should be used as a tool. So, in certain aspects of maybe the idea generation of making that product, like what are some ideas of the parts of like what you could do, and maybe the verification at the end. But I think that same middle section where you actually have to build it, you have to test it out, you have to do all those things, the durability testing as well, that is still going to require a human, I think. So I think it would be maybe a tool to help, but I don't think it'll replace it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Alan, if you have a comment or a question, and then we'll let Ms. Hallquist go back to her presentation.
Well, I do have a question, but if you think we're running out of time, I'll defer to her continuing.
Yeah, why don't we wait till a little later? Please go ahead, Ms. Hallquist.
Okay. All right. So I guess we'll get back to you. Maybe in the next couple slides, it'll answer your question. So we just talked about a lot of unethical applications of AI in education. Specifically, we were just talking about writing an essay. So I will say you could go into ChatGPT and say, write me an essay on this topic, blah, 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 in this many words. And it does a very good job. And that is scary, especially when we were talking about for writing and things like that. And you can't necessarily go back and just do paper, because that honestly seems like we're moving backwards in the past, where it might be hindering others learning because of the fear of using the tool. But we need to make sure that we are, I think especially when talking about elementary, middle school education, making sure they're still getting the foundation of writing and not relying on this tool. Also using AI to cheat on exams and assignments. For some of my homework assignments, I talked about how some people were able to just plug in the entire assignment and description, and able to submit it just from that output. And that's really scary. I mean, what is the effectiveness of that? You're not really learning anything. You're just blindly doing something. You're on autopilot. And then faking citation and research sources, that's very concerning. And then also one of mine is that professors using it to grade assignments. I had a professor that graded one of our projects just with AI, and I could tell. And it's very scary because we talked about how AI doesn't have that human empathy that we all have. And you can actually tell it that you're never going to be a perfect grade in AI's book, because it's always learning, remember. So for example, we actually did a thing where we graded 5 different assignments, or I think it was 25 different assignments. And every single time we did it, the first assignment we turned in to grade, or we put in the query, it always gave the highest score. So is there bias in that, where you're going to be the lucky kid in class if you're the first essay that's auto graded with AI? So that's very concerning. So I think, like we all agree on, AI is powerful, but how we use it defines whether it helps or harms education. So now to talk about what are some helpful ways of using AI in education. So first thing is simplifying the hard stuff. So I talked about how in my high level physics course, I used ChatGPT to say, explain this to me as a sixth grader. And I gradually could increase the level. And because of that, I got a really good foundation of a concept. And that might not be as realistic if you were asking a teacher or a human and expect them to do that. There's also next level notes. I talked about how it was really helpful with my notes and finishing them and cleaning them up. It also was able to made me able to speed read my readings with giving me like a summary and stuff like that that made it less scary to read that dense material. Step-by-step help, you can use it as a kind of like a plan on attempting a problem, like tell me the steps or tell me how to solve this problem. It actually walks through the steps and it doesn't just tell you the answer. It can create practice exams. So like in that course where I didn't have any practice material or any example problems, it was very helpful. Also, let's talk about like turning in an essay. At least none of my friends would want to read my super long essays that were very, very technical. But I needed someone to read it through. I needed another person's perspective. And so I was actually able to plug it into ChatGPT and say, grade it on this rubric, the rubric from class. And I was able to um, make my essay better based off of those points. And then also writing help. My writing professor was the one that actually recommended the pre-grading and also the writing help of making your writing better with spelling, grammar, maybe flow. One thing that I do is I still want to keep writing myself, like my own tone and everything, is sometimes I'll have it help me write an outline. And then I can write my own actual work. And then I use it to edit it for like grammar and spelling. And then also there's some new tools that you can use that I'm going to talk about further, which is Notebook LM. So one thing that I wanted to talk about as well with AI as with education is the Two Sigma effect, which was a study by Bloom, which was the result was that students that received one-on-one tutoring performed 2 standard deviations better than those in the traditional classroom. And that means they outperformed 98% of their peers. And it's due to the personalized instruction matched to the student's pace and understanding. And for example, my freshman year, I was in all those weed out classes and in my sophomore year. And in some of the courses, I was struggling. It was just really, really hard. And only the top 5% of the class would get an A. And I wanted to be in that. I really wanted to master the material. So I went to the university and tried to find a tutor that was supposed to be offered to me through engineering. But because I was already had such good grades or I wasn't struggling in the class, I wasn't allowed to get a tutor. So through the university. So I had to go and get a private tutor to master the material. And you don't necessarily need a tutor, but I think having a tutor for one of my classes freshman year dramatically affected my experience. I was more excited to learn. I learned how to learn, and I saw how I could match things to my um, performance. And so throughout my education, I started using ChatGPT as a tutor my senior year of college. So, um, but AI like ChatGPT and Gemini can be utilized as students as this tutor to match these students' pace of learning and understanding. So, why is ChatGPT a really good tutor? Well, I have a bunch of reasons. So, first of all, it's available anytime, 24/7. You could be studying at 2 a.m. and type something in, and you'll get a response within seconds. And that is so different than emailing your professor or things like that. Some of my professors, you're not allowed to ask any questions within 10 or 24 hours of an exam. It's also a judgment-free zone. So some people are always like, oh, you can ask as many questions as you want. But when you're nearing that fifth question, you can kind of tell they're getting at the end of their rope a little bit, you know? They might be frustrated and you kind of feel the pressure of, okay, I shouldn't ask any more questions. Um, it also is, you might feel like pressured by it and things like that. Um, it's also patient. You could ask as many questions about the same topic. You could ask the same question over and over, and you won't feel that it's becoming impatient with you. It's also personalized help of adapting to your pace, level, and learning style, step-by-step guidance, like I talked about with the steps of approaching a problem. It can go beyond the textbook. So a textbook might only have one example of that concept, but ChatGPT could give you 20. Um, it also can cover almost everything. So, compared to having a private tutor, someone that teaches chemistry might not be very good at teaching physics or vice versa. And so you have one-stop shop. And then it's also completely free, so it's accessible for everyone. And it's actually in the last 2 months, ChatGPT is offered for free for students for 2 months, and Gemini is offered for 3 months for students for free as well. So AI brings personalized learning to scale, moving us closer to the benefits of one-on-one tutoring. And then I did want to talk about Chegg. So Chegg is also a homework help platform, and was really expensive. I think it changes prices, but I mean around like $20 a month, and it would help you with your textbook problems. Um, and it kind of was a monopoly in the industry, I would say, for that. And since ChatGPT has been introduced, its stock price has plummeted by 99%, resulting in a loss of $14.5 billion in market value. So, I mean, this is really controlling the market as well for education, as you can see. And you can see that was at the topic. I think that it was also at the peak, I would note, because of COVID. A lot of people were doing everything from their computer and they didn't have access to help in school because they weren't in person. And then, so I want to talk about one of my tools, and I'm going to show this to you, but it's called Notebook LM, and it's powered by Google. It's free for everyone, so you guys could use it too. And I'm going to show you how I used it for one of my classes in college. So let me see. Um, okay. Can you see, does it say biomechanics on the screen?
No, it's showing your email.
Oh, shoot. Let's see. Um, is it still green?
No,
Oh,
no.
yes.
Does it say biomechanics?
Yes.
Okay. So this is called Notebook LM, and it's by Google. So like I said, it's free and it's easy to use. And this is one of my classes. So I created a new class and I added my notes. So I just clicked this and I uploaded my notes from my computer. So like, I don't know if you can see when it pops up like that, but I was able to upload all of my notes very easily, and it gives you a summary of the notes and key topics like this for all these different things. And then also gives you a summary, and this is kind of like a chat GPT that's just trained on my data. So my data is my notes from my class and my equations. So for example, I could ask, how do biomedical models quantitatively assess and internal forces within the human body? And it responds based on my notes, which is super cool and very fast, as you can see. Like segment center of mass, it refers to math like I was talking about earlier. It could refer to the equations. And then
Miss
over,
Hallquist, can I just ask, so does that mean there are no hallucinations in this because it's drawing it just from this limited data pool?
yeah, so that's specifically what makes it great is because that there's less of a risk of hallucinations. I've never seen a hallucination on it. But I mean, if I put more time and detail, I could maybe find one. But because I could check my sources, it doesn't have hallucinations at all, really. So, yeah, this would make it so it's less likely to hallucinate. And something else that's cool is I was able to create a mind map. So if I click to open this is my main topic. Oh, wait. Can you guys see when I open this up? Like, does this show?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
It can show me how when I clicked skeletal muscle, all the different parts of the skeletal muscle that I needed to know. Let's see if I click muscle strength. These are all the different factors for muscle strength and different equations that I need to know. And it can just keep going into more detail and it connects all of my readings. The other thing that's cool is I'm gonna actually load a podcast, so this might take a few minutes or a few moments, but I'm also able to create a study guide. So here's a briefing document on all my notes that was just automatically created. And then I can also ask for an FAQ. Let's say it was like a history document. I could do my timeline. Um, and then here is the study guide. So it gives me quiz questions with answers in them. So distinguish between external and internal forces, providing an example. And here are you can see it messed up a little bit right here, but the essay format questions. So for exams, like some of the AP exams where you have essay based, and then there's also glossary of key terms. And so this could be like a one-stop shop where maybe you get all your information about a unit for class, and you can upload this and then read over the study guide first to understand what's kind of going on, or the briefing doc. And so this right here was a podcast just created on my notes. So let me know if you can hear it.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be
Could you guys hear it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll play it then.
getting physical.
Oh,
Yeah, we're going to be diving deep into muscles and movement.
okay.
And this all ties into occupational ergonomics, which I know you're super interested in.
Yeah.
You provided us with some really awesome material from that University of Wisconsin course.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking over it, and it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, your muscles are like these tiny little high-powered machines, and if we really want to understand how to design safer, more efficient workplaces,
Right.
it all comes back to understanding these muscles.
Yeah, the intricacies of human anatomy never cease to amaze me.
For sure, for sure.
And the fact that we can apply this knowledge to real-world scenarios, like you said,
Yeah.
designing better work environments.
Yeah.
So, for example, I can upload my notes and it can create a podcast based off of my notes. And you might be like, oh, why would you use that? But for me, it was incredibly useful because I would listen to a podcast on what I was studying that week in class on my walk to class. Maybe sometimes I was in the gym and I was walking on the treadmill and I could listen to something like that. I could be doing my dishes, putting them in the dishwasher, and I could listen to a podcast on something from class. And it makes it less scary to start some of these dense readings. Like I had some law readings that I had to do, when I could hear a fun and casual conversation about it instantly at my fingertips. Alan, do you have a question?
Yes.
What is it?
I have 2 or 3 or more stories that are half or 3/4 written, and I need a punch ending to some of these, a creative ending. Is there a way that I could give these stories to ChatGTP and ask them to come up with a creative ending?
Yes, that's a great use of ChatGPT.
So what would be the procedure? How would I load the story into ChatGTP and ask him to find an ending?
Yeah, I can show you right now.
Okay, if you would, unless other people want other questions, but I would appreciate an illustration on how to do that.
So you would go to the ChatGPT website and you'd open up a chat. So this is how your screen would look. And if you had your story readily available, you would copy and paste it. Do you know how to copy paste it?
Yes.
Okay, so you would just paste in story, and then
Now
right
this is a rather long story, so the copy and paste is a very, very, very large copy, but that's okay.
That's okay, but you can also, right here where it says add photos and files, you could click that and upload your story.
Got it. Okay.
And then so you would you would say at the beginning, can you please make a punchy ending for this story?
Yes.
And then you would either paste the story right here, or you would just upload it by
Uh,
clicking this. And then, so like, for example, I can say, can you make a quick, funny story? And it would output something like this, but for your prompt. And see, it did that instantly. And I iterate it, like make it different by, you could say, oh, make it about a dog.
mm.
And you can, or be more funny and short.
Okay, well, I'll fool around with that. But the
Mhm.
starting thing is to open up a conversation and feed in a file with my story, and then interact with them about how to finish my story.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll give it a try. Now, I have a different question, but if other people have questions, I'll let them ask.
Well, can you just hold that, Alan, so we can see more of the present?
Fine, go ahead. We're running out of time, I'm afraid.
No, we're good.
Okay, and then so we were talking about how using AI as a tool. And one of my favorite books that I will recommend all of you to read, it's a very short read. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And he did a great job of explaining when calculators came around, everyone was very scared that it would kill their math skills. So, with graphing calculators, oh, you don't need to know how to do some of the, even a quadratic formula anymore, or things like that. And critics believe students would forget how to do basic arithmetic. But what actually happened was calculators freed us to focus on higher level problem solving. So now we can do more advanced math than ever, and we're able to actually discover a lot of great things within the math realm due to having that alleviated stress from the calculator of just adding and subtracting or creating a graph and things like that. And so that could be similar to the AI fear of AI will make us lazy or unskilled, but it could be used as a tool, not a shortcut that could enhance learning, creativity, and productivity. So fear leads to falling behind. Those who embrace AI thoughtfully will move ahead. So moving on to AI in the workplace. AI is not just in the education world, but also in the workplace. It could help you draft emails, reports, polish your tone, could help you learn a topic too. You could easily ask ChatGPT, explain me this topic, or explain this topic to me. It could help debug your code. It could help with your resume. We were recommended to use it to help um, edit our resumes and ask for tips, and you can actually use it to be like a job negotiation coach. So it could teach you how to negotiate, or it could teach you how to perform well in interviews and things like that. It could help you brainstorm ideas, and it could also help you summarize notes. I've heard that you guys use the AI that's with Zoom to do your takeaways and things like that. So AI won't replace your job, but someone who uses AI might. And so with that, I think that there are five new skills in this era of AI that are going to be expected from um, new hires at companies. So, being explicit in prompt engineering, detection of hallucinations, knowing that you need to have human oversight with empathy, being AI literate, so keeping up with AI, being able to detect AI, and being adaptable and curious. So prompt engineering, I talked about this a little bit earlier, and that means that you're designing your questions and queries to be very specific to get exactly the output that you want. I had two very well-respected professors in the my AI, two different AI classes. One professor created prompts that were a paragraph long, very specific, a lot of detail, and my other professor said, "Oh, I like short queries." And so it's really subjective, but at the end of the day, which one was more specific was the better one for prompt engineering. So an example of prompt engineering, for example, I asked ChatGPT, explain photosynthesis. As you can tell, it spit out a response in great detail. But I don't know if I really want to read all that when I was just wondering what it was. Instead, I ask, explain photosynthesis in simple terms like I'm in sixth grade, then summarize it in one sentence I could use for a flashcard. So this is more what I was looking for. Maybe we were talking about it at dinner and I just needed a quick little blurb. We talked about previously that instead of like Google searching and getting sources to answer your question, ChatGPT will answer your question directly, which is really helpful. So this is an example of how this might be more of what I want as a user, and I got this result compared to this because I was more clear in my prompt. Additionally, it is really important to be able to detect hallucinations. So I keep on saying that word, and I want to provide some examples. For example, ChatGPT might mistakenly say that Nikola Tesla was the one who invented the light bulb when it was really Thomas Edison. And so how are you going to check that? Well, you should always fact check your important answers with like the internet and clicking the sources and things. Um, and you can also specifically ask for the sources. Or there could be an example of a hallucination of including quotes or facts that are not really in an article when you're asking to summarize it, and it's fabricating the content. Or when you're asking to list certain people, it might make up some people at the same time. And so being able to have experience in that realm where, oh, I know that this person's not supposed to be in the meeting or things like that. So, um, and then also you having human oversight and empathy. So this is really important, especially in corporate world, because think of like an HR representative, they're emailing back an applicant that they didn't get a job. What if they just directly pasted something from ChatGPT that said, you didn't get the job, like you're not proficient enough in this. Instead, that didn't have any human empathy in it, where someone should be reading it over and being like, that tone might come across wrong. And where they might say, oh, this is why we have a bunch of great applicants and things like that, where the human element is needed. So, an example of this is using AI generated feedback on an essay. The AI output might be, this essay is weak and lacks clear structure. If a professor was to copy and paste that onto your grade, wouldn't that would be kind of harsh and blunt when you worked really hard on an essay. Maybe it's 30 pages long and you spent weeks on it. If you made sure to have the professor made sure to have human oversight and empathy and apply it, a revised version might be, you've made a strong effort to explore this topic. To strengthen your argument, try organizing your points and actually giving substantial recommendations. So that's an example of why humans are really important to still be in the loop, even with the writing and things like that. And then I was talking about being AI literate, and this is incredibly important. And I think you obviously need to read the news and things like that. But I think being able to tell when things are AI generated is really important. So, for example, we're going to detect some AI images. So, could someone tell me what is off with this picture?
If I can just shout out, the it looks like he's looking at himself in a mirror, but the shirt sleeves don't match.
Yes, so this person is in a long sleeve and this person's in a short sleeve, and their hair is a little bit different. So we just found a fabricated content from AI and some of the telltale signs. In this picture down here, you can tell that this photo that's AI generated, there's an extra finger right here. Um, and that's just kind of an example of what to detect in AI generated images to be able to tell if they're real or not. So are there distorted hands, eyes, or faces? Is there inconsistent lighting? Is it unreadable text, or is there maybe a spelling error in the text? Is it over perfection? I mean, at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about my dog, the picture of my dog, and we were saying it looked way too perfect, you know? So now I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a quiz time. Which picture is AI generated, the left or the right?
Right.
It's actually the left. It looks extremely realistic, but that just shows how um, how advanced these AI generated pictures are. It looks just like it would be in the Smoky Mountains and things like that. Now, which picture is this? Which one is AI generated?
Right.
Yep, you're right. Is there something that you noticed with it, or
Well, it's much more vivid than the one on the left.
yeah, so very perfect in a way. What about these?
I would guess the one on the left again because it's more vivid.
Yeah, I kind of messed with you guys. These are actually both AI generated, which is kind of crazy because both of these look pretty surreal, but I agree the lighting on this one is very different. And then for this one,
I like the one on the right better, so I'm going to vote for the one on the right.
well, that was actually real. Neither of these images are AI generated. So, I mean, there's still in the real world, some of the images will be real, hopefully. So, it seems like you are pretty good at detecting them. And then,
Can I ask Ms. Hallquist? I actually saw a presentation by a group called the News Literacy Project by a local journalist and how they went about their work in a realm of all these fake photos. And apparently, they make a friend of Google Photos search. So the easiest way to find a fake is to search for that photo and find that it dates to something completely else than
yeah,
it was put forward for.
I I think I might have put that in my appendix, but yes, the easiest way to know if something's AI generated is to reverse image search on Google. It's very helpful. But that would be very scary in the news industry. Um,
Well,
yeah.
it's just the way she described it is it's part of their regular job, you know?
Mhm. Wow. So that's just a new task that I guess they are expected to do as well now.
Mm-hmm.
So AI might be alleviating some of the tedious tasks, but might be also bringing on some.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So also detecting AI and text. This version B, I'm not going to read these out loud, is AI generated. And something that you can easily look for, is it really formal or kind of robotic? Is it repetitive? Sometimes it's very redundant. It'll talk in circles. It could lack personal tone or detail. So like I did this, blah, blah, or like this reminds me of when, blah. Um, and something else to notice is that it uses a lot of M dashes. That's something, even when I was at my graduation, I could tell when some of the speakers, some of their speeches were AI created. I was like, I can hear the M dashes in this speech. So, and I could tell that some of the zero personal experience, it was easy to tell that it was AI generated. And then the last skill that I talked about, being adaptable and curious, you don't need to be an expert in AI, you don't need to master it, but you need to be willing to learn, try, and grow with the technology. That's probably one of the biggest takeaways. And then moving on to AI in everyday life. So we just talked about AI in school, we just talked about AI in the workplace. AI also has a place in our everyday life, and this could be shopping and budgeting. So you might tell ChatGPT, I have all these foods in my fridge, what could I make for dinner? You could use it to compare prices. You could ask for it to create a meal plan and a shopping list for the week. You could use it to create cleaning checklists. You could ask for what meal you should make for dinner. You could ask for book and show recommendations. You could get personalized fitness tips. One thing that I did is I asked how to increase my energy levels in the morning. or how to wake up earlier more naturally and things like that. Um, one of my favorite analogies that I got at one of my internships was one of the executives said, you need to think of AI like an intern. So an intern is fully capable, it's really smart, it's fast, it's tireless, it has a lot of energy, and it's eager. But it has the ability to do tasks, but it might not know how to do tasks right away. Now you might know how to do a task and could explain it to others, but you are so busy, you're bored of the task, you're tired, you don't want to do it. You could offload this task to your intern, the AI, by giving it direction, feedback, and oversight. And by doing that, you alleviate your workload on non-value added tasks, and then you have more time for more impactful, interesting tasks. So, like when we were talking about planning out your groceries for the week, maybe that's something that you don't really want to do, but you have some oversight of, I try not to eat as much sugar, or I try to keep my cholesterol down, or things like that, where you can offload that task as long as you give it direction and read over the results and don't blindly trust it. So, um, the last thing is making your own ChatGPT intern. So I was just going to show you how I could easily make uh, a tech translator agent. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and showing how I made this for my dad the other day. And I think you guys might get a kick out of it. So
I think this is something we'll try to do for, maybe I will make an agent
yeah,
for pie presenters,
yeah.
brainstorming or something.
Yes. So I think this is an easy way to be able to use ChatGPT in a controlled environment. So this is why I want to show this today. So I'm in the ChatGPT app. So all I did was type in chatgpt.com. And this is and you do have to log in. You have to like create an account. So I just used my Google account, but this is free for everyone. And you go over to this left panel and you click GPT, and we're going to create our own mini chat GPT. So this can make it easier to be able to like trust it on a task or things. The main use of these GPT agents, so it's like a smaller version of it, is that you don't have to type in the prompt every time. So this is what I did for my dad the other day, is I wanted to make a tech translator. So create a tech translator GPT that answers or that explains current technology in a short, funny, brief way. And so now it's updating my GPT. I'm going to call it Tech Translator. So I'm going to say, call it Tech Translator. And now watch out for up here, it's going to update. And do you like it, or should we tweak it a bit? I'm going to say, I love it. And then I'm going to ask for it to say, can you include an analogy of the technology to someone born in 1965? So this is what I did for my dad earlier this week. So now I'm going to go into this preview area, and let's say I ask, what is the cloud?
Mixtapes. Oh.
Yeah. So this is, if I publish this, it would say, the cloud is not the fluffy thing that you stared at while listening to Fleetwood Mac. In tech speak, the cloud is just someone else's computer. Seriously, instead of saving your files, photos, or running programs on your dusty old PC, your big, powerful computers in a mystery warehouse. And so, like, let's say I create this, and I'm just going to do only me for right now. So I'm gonna talk like maybe I'm my dad, and so I I'm thinking, what is quantum computing? And so I go into ChatGPT, I type ChatGPT at the top, and I know I already created this mini GPT for myself. And I go to the side and I click Tech Translator, and I say, what is quantum computing? Quantum computing is like your old IBM PC got dosed with radioactive goo and turned into a superhero. Instead of boring old bits, quantum computers use qubits, which could be 1, 0, or both at the same time. So think
So
about
the Tech Translator app remembered
yes.
your add-on of the, 1965.
Yes, and I said make it funny, make it short, and make it like those types of variables. I mean, I could, and so now whenever my dad asks a question, he can go directly in here. So like for the music example, how you were talking about for a fifth grade reading level, maybe you have your own GPT that's fifth grade reading level, and you don't have to type that in every time.
This is great.
I can't, I think someone asked, why won't my iCloud pictures update?
Hmm.
So now let's see if it searches the web. Here are the common reasons. So it talks in a way that it knows that I am someone born in 1965, or that's the goal. So it still can be helpful with that things, but let's say what is a USB-C charger? I have a spelling error, but look, it didn't even need it. It's like a Swiss Army knife of charging cables, but finally without 47 confusing attachments. The C is for can't mess this up unofficially. So that was something that I could easily make, and I don't have to think about how I prompt it. So, yeah, I can make one that's just talking about can you relate everything to sailing? So I could go in and edit this and do things like that. So it is pretty cool. And I think a great way to be a challenging application that you can try out. And then let me stop sharing
Thanks.
the screen. Um,
So while you're doing that, Andy Shoka, you are the door prize winner for today's pie meeting.